Hey folks, this week we're talking about VMware moving to KVM, Ubuntu's missing a kernel PPA, and Microsoft's sort of endorsement of Alma Linux. Then we do a live update to Fedora 41, that mostly goes well. X has yet another vulnerability, the kernel gets a minor fix, and a Valve engineer finds a really big performance fix in the AMD drivers. It's a lot of fun, you don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 176, recorded Saturday, November the 2nd. That install went sideways. Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It is time for the Untitled Linux Show. That's where we geek out about Linux and software and open source and some hardware and all kinds of other stuff. It's going to be a lot of fun. So it's not just me, of course. We've got the whole crew here. We've got Rob, Ken, and Jeff. Feels like we play the Brady Bunch every time when we do that. You know, we should all look at each other like, hi, but we've got some great stories for you this week, and we're actually going to let Rob get started. I think we let Rob get started because Rob was the first one that put his stories in the document. It's first come, first serve around here, and Rob was the early bird that got the worm. What's new with VMware? There are still memes out there about break glass in case of Broadcom and all of that. What's new with VMware?
Well, this week I bring stories about most of my favorite Linux topics. And to start, VMs are awesome. Virtual machines, not voicemails. Voicemails are not so awesome. But I am always telling these guys and other people on Linux groups that there's no point to using a Type 2 hypervisor like VirtualBox or VMware Workstation or anything else when Linux has a fast Type 1 hypervisor built right into the kernel. And of course, I'm talking about KVM there and Broadcom. Yes, the Broadcom I love to hate appears to agree with me as they are working to switch the CPU virtualization of their VMware Workstation on Linux from their own proprietary code to using Linux's built-in KVM. We're not sure when this will be available, but the general thinking is sometime in 2025, but that depends on how quickly their necessary KVM changes can be upstreamed and if they're accepted. And in turn, how quickly they're picked up by the major distributions. And even though I'm sure Broadcom is looking for free labor here to do this part of the work for them, this also brings up another potential benefit to KVM. As much as I'm not a fan of Broadcom, VMware has been a leader in virtualization for many, many years, since the beginning of virtualization. And, if they were to start contributing to KVM, maybe we could see some more vast improvements. Or maybe this is just their way of saying, we made our product free because the workstation was made free. I want to say this summer or spring. We had that on the show. Maybe they're just saying, we made it free. And so now it doesn't really matter to us. Let's let the community essentially maintain at least part of it because we don't really care anymore. We'll see. Along with this, it sounds like the Windows and Mac versions have already moved to the OS's native virtualization. The Windows 1, Hyper-V, and Mac. I believe I kind of caught that somewhere. I never saw a story about it, but I saw somebody said that. So, that's one way to get out of the business. In the end, all they really care about maybe is their subscriptions for their ESX, vSphere and vCenter stuff. But in the end, my advice is still to just go native, use KVM QEMU, virtual manager boxes or any other front end. Makes it just as easy as any other more commercial options. Yet it's can be made super lightweight when you run it headless without that bloated front end GUI. So, other people are seeing the light, moving over to KVM. I think you should too.
Yeah, it's real fascinating that VMware raised their prices, right? Isn't that where all of this started? VMware got bought out and then raised their prices significantly, and a bunch of people jumped ship. Yeah. And now they're moving to the KVM backend. So it seems like they're getting rid of some of their secret sauce.
Well, they raised
as raising their prices.
Well, they raised their prices on their vCenter, vSphere, their ESX, more enterprise, like a Proxmox kind of thing. Whereas they made their workstation free because I don't know. I suppose they just didn't. Maybe they didn't want to focus on it, or they saw that this product really isn't. I don't know, doing anything. They probably could sell it since there's so many free versions anyway. So it's like, well, let's just give it away so we don't die here.
So does that mean we've just basically adding another graphic user interface on top of KVM?
Yes and no. I mean, I like to say, yep, just another one, but really they're still going to use like their own GPU virtualization and other hardware virtualization is still going to be theirs for now.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's actually, I made the joke about the secret sauce, but there is a lot of secret sauce in VMware. There's a lot of like value add that they have. I would love to see more of it become open source and less proprietary. I think that'd be good for everybody, and maybe that's the direction that VMware is moving. Now, here's the question for you: do we think this is a result of influence from Broadcom? After Broadcom bought them, did they say, "All right, guys, it's time to get rid of 1 million lines of proprietary code. Let's just get rid of it and move to something open source"? Is that a conversation that you think happened?
I think it's something to do with their accounting team in one way or another.
the support model.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, one benefit I heard, I believe, is like I've never tried this before. I've never ran VMware Workstation and KVM at the same time. I thought somebody said something about you can only have like one hypervisor running at a time, I suppose. So now you could potentially be running VMware Workstation and KVM. Theoretically, I could see how that would be a problem. I've never tried that.
It probably depends on how you're running it, right? Because like you can run KVM without it being a hypervisor. Technically speaking, a hypervisor is not the Linux kernel. A hypervisor is something that's like actually on top of it, runs up, like underneath it, whichever way you want to do the stack here. But the hypervisor is closer to bare metal, and then you've got your Linux kernel and KVM inside of that. So yeah, by definition, I think you cannot run more than one hypervisor. But anyway, we will see. Definitely something to keep track of, keep an eye on. Jeff, sir. What's up with Ubuntu and their mainline kernel PPA?
I know, right? Let's talk about kernels and get back to Linux here. Pure Linux, no virtual machines. Ubuntu's mainline kernel PPA has been down since mid-September. What's the mainline kernel PPA, you ask? Well, we've covered this in the past, but I think it's been a couple years or longer, and actually it was about 2 years when I looked it up. So we'll give it a little refresher course. So while not as relevant maybe as it once was, because Ubuntu's releasing with more recent kernels, they still age, and maybe a person needs or wants to try a newer kernel. There's always an option of compiling it yourself, but Ubuntu makes it easier. The mainline kernel PPA contains the latest kernels, which are compiled to work with Ubuntu, meaning the options they use to compile the normal Ubuntu kernel are also used to compile the new kernels. So while they're not considered, enterprise safe, they are still flagged as stable. So while I wouldn't run the server farm on it unless you really know what you're doing, they're fine for normal users. And, like most of us listening to the podcast, just for your standard computer, they work just fine. They compile the release candidates as well, so a person can try the freshest versions out there. The downside is the updates are done manually, meaning they're not part of the normal package updater. But if you listen back to episode 75 on November 5th, 2022, I cover a tool called Mainline, which will install the mainline kernels for you, so it's at least semi-automated. And, you can pause at specific versions or jump over versions, or you can do whatever you want with it if you so desire. So, I ran that tool for quite a while, keeping on the latest kernels on my system, and I never had a problem. Well, fast forward to today, and we got the story in the show notes, which is the mainline kernel PPA has stopped compiling kernels. If you go back and scroll all the way to the bottom of the list, it looks like things are fine, and checking version numbers reveals that the latest kernel out there is 6.11, and it was released September 15th on the website. There's been nothing added since, so none of the 6.12 series is there, and even the 6.11 point releases are not there. As of today, November 2nd, 2024, the latest kernel is 6.12-RC5, and for the stable release, it's 6.11.6. Michael Larrable comments on this because most of his testing is done with the mainline kernels. And the reason he does that is when a vendor will reach out to him to try and reproduce something, it's easy to point to the PPA and say, I use this kernel. There's no guessing on the compiler, the settings, no having to send large files around the internet. You know, all configurations are known, so he can just point there and say, that's what I used. Doing some searching, I've not been able to find out why it's down. You know, in the past, when there were errors, it would still have the kernel series, but there would be errors inside the series. So you would maybe see the RC5, but it would not have the target files that you could download, but it would give some errors. So you at least have kind of some clues on what the issue was. This time, it's like the entire process is stopped. They're not even trying to compile the kernels or even create the directories for those kernels. Because in the past, it would at least create the directories. And sometimes, you know, ARM would compile, but x86 wouldn't. Or, you know, you'd see it sometimes the other way as well. But at least something was showing up. So I'll keep an eye out when this gets fixed. But if you're curious, you can check out our previous show and install the mainline tool and install the latest and greatest kernel when it becomes available. In the meantime, there are guides on how to compile it from scratch. But, you know, I've done both, and I'll be honest, I like to be lazy and just use the mainline tool and the PPA. You know, I'll personally be waiting because, you know, I'll be honest too, I don't have a killer feature or hardware issue that the kernel can fix for me right now. So I don't have any pressing reason to get off of 6.11 and try to test out 6.12. Check out the link in the show notes for the details, as it has a link to the Ubuntu mainline PPA, and everyone can keep track of the updates themselves. So happy updating.
Yeah, with something like that, I always have to wonder, like, was this just a script that was running and nobody touched it? And so, like, how can I say this without being very macabre? The way that I almost said that would be very dark. Let's just say that somebody forgot about it and never touched it for a while. And, like, we're just now discovering that something is broken in one of the latest kernel versions. So not necessarily saying broken in the kernel itself, but just like the interaction between the kernel and the script.
I don't think it's broken at all. I think it's a feature. Canonical realized that people who want the latest and greatest just mostly aren't using Ubuntu.
It's a PPA, so it's not official Canonical at all.
Yeah, it is compiled in the official Canonical way, so it does work with Ubuntu and all that. It's very Debian Ubuntu friendly. But yeah, I kind of wonder if something broke, because you'd see last time it was like compile errors. There was like a package that it needed rev. You know, there were some dependency issues, and so you could kind of see what was going on there. And they went in and they fixed it. This one, yeah, the whole script just stopped, or it's not able to reach the source code for some reason, or.
One feedback on what you just said in that line there, the PPA being Debian Ubuntu friendly. I believe you're not supposed to use PPAs on Debian. I think you're pretty much only recommended using that in Ubuntu and Ubuntu derivatives, as supposedly it can break things, I believe is what my understanding of that.
That makes sense.
Well, if you've been following along in Club TWiT's Discord, Keith 512 had mentioned it as early as the 10th of October that it seems to not be updating.
It's broken for a bit. Close to a month.
And you can technically run PPAs on Debian, but just for the audience, PSA, it's not recommended to run PPAs on Debian.
It's very much a your mileage may vary sort of a deal.
Yeah. Well, you're running a lot of RC candidates too. So, you just.
I mean, for that, not always.
We're just going pedal to the metal.
There's plenty of times to run a PPA just because it's not in the regular repo too. But
yeah. All right, Ken, let's talk about Azure from our favorite development company, our favorite software company out there,
Microsoft.
Well, I don't know about that, but I do want to thank SK for writing about this for us. He wrote that Linux is now the top operating system on Azure. SK states over 60% of Azure customer workloads run on Linux. He also states Microsoft is committed to making Linux work even better on Azure to meet customer needs by announcing that Alma Linux is an officially supported Linux distribution on Azure, with a link to the recent announcement in his article even. Is this great news for the Linux community? I'm going to say yes. We recently achieved a 5% desktop market share, and this adds just another feather to our hat, or should I say Fedora. SK's article describes Alma Linux as the new star in enterprise Linux because of its key features. It's always free, community-led, long-term stability, easy migration thanks to tools like Alma Linux Deploy and Elevate, and it has wide platform support. Microsoft's endorsement of Alma Linux on Azure shows a high level of trust in Alma Linux's capabilities. Now, to earn this endorsement, Alma Linux had to meet several important criteria set by Microsoft. It had to have a proven demand. We saw that. Contractual agreement, strong engineering collaboration between Microsoft and Alma Linux engineers, and a dedicated Azure content mirror. According to SK, the growing popularity of Linux on Azure, along with the endorsement of Alma Linux, is an important moment in the evolution of cloud computing. This trend is likely to continue, solidifying Linux's position as the dominant operating system in the cloud as more businesses adopt Linux-based solutions. You can now find Alma Linux available through the Azure Marketplace for both x86 and ARM64 architectures. For more details, I do recommend following the link in our show notes to SK's article.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Do you know, is Rocky on the list, or is it just Alma Linux?
SK didn't talk too much about Rocky. Actually, he didn't say anything about Rocky.
I do have to wonder. So, like, Rocky is the one that's sort of being stubborn and still trying to be bug for bug compatible with RHEL. And I wonder if Microsoft would look at that and go, it's a little dicey. We don't want to be a part of that. I don't know.
If you want that feature, just go with RHEL.
That's true. There are pros and cons to that.
No, I'm saying that's probably their viewpoint.
Well, indeed, and it's true. There are just pros and cons to it.
I wonder if, with them, well, maybe they don't realize. I'm sure they realize Linux being a top guest operating system on there. I wonder if they'll start to work on any of the other improvements that, like, I'll be talking about with QE maybe later.
I would dare say that they already have been. If you look at like the list of who's who in the kernel each year, Microsoft is basically always in the top 10 as far as kernel contributions.
I wonder if they have like special drivers like the VirtIO drivers.
I'm not sure. One would hope that they would use VirtIO and just make that work. But anyway, so talking about Red Hat stuff, Fedora 41 is out, and I'm going to do something a little crazy. I am going to make this machine behind me go away, and yeah, there we go. It's gone. Now, what I don't know is whether you're going to get to see the upgrade on this screen or if it's going to be on the screen directly behind me, which if it's directly behind me, you won't be able to see it at all. But anyway, we're doing it live. We're doing an upgrade to Fedora 41, and we will see during the show if it actually comes up and works or if it crashes and burns. Fedora 41 does have a couple of really cool things in it. The one that weirdly I am most excited for is DNF 5. DNF is the updater. It is the command line tool for getting updates for installing new packages. And DNF 5 is so much faster. It's ridiculously better than the DNF 4.
I've heard it's good.
Yeah, I've run it in beta. I think I was running it in alpha actually before it went beta. And so, yeah, it's really good. It does some really cool stuff. There's other things in there, of course, like GNOME 47. It actually ships with KDE 6.2, which I think is already on Fedora 40. So that's not that new. There are a few things in there, like Firefox is now going to ship with Pipewire camera support, which is really cool. Just some interesting things like that. But DNF5 is the big one, at least for me, for user facing. Oh yeah, there you go. It is showing up on the screen. So if you look, you got to turn your head the right way to be able to see it. But it's installing packages. It's doing its thing. So we'll see what happens with that.
So can we say the install went sideways on you during the show?
I think we just found the show title. The install went sideways. Oh, all right. Well, Jeff, since I am doing an update of KDE Plasma, what can I look forward to in future versions of KDE Plasma?
Well, this week in Plasma, our friend Nate Graham has a few updates that he would like to share. So the first is the link in the show notes doesn't take you to his normal blog spot. He now has a new home for this week in Plasma. He now has his blog post hosted on the KDE infrastructure. So this means that others can help contribute. He has a link to a merge request page, and after it's published, if there's a typo or a broken link, it can be fixed by the audience. So Nate's blog is even going more open source.
Nice.
So now in the past, we have talked about the kernel is going to be more friendly to shortages of memory by shutting down things instead of just crashing. And we've had other shows where we talk about that. It's trying to be more graceful and not come to a screeching halt. Well, KDE is now going to announce when the kernel needs to terminate a program. So there's a service that runs in the background that will detect when the kernel has done this and will give a notification so the user can be aware of what's going on. Now, just to be clear, KDE is only notifying when this happens. The actual killing of apps is all done on the kernel side. I say that because I know there's going to be somebody going, what is KDE doing? They're killing my apps. No. It's just telling you about what the kernel's doing. So there even be a little bit of helpful hints in the notification on how to save memory and basically just help people that maybe not quite as computer savvy to better manage their memory. There are a couple of UI improvements this week, but just a couple, as most of the work is just chasing down bugs. On the improvement side, the emoji selector now can match substrings in the middle of words, so finding your perfect emojis that you're looking for will be even easier. The grouping indicator on the task manager, which is a little green looking plus sign, won't always be green now and will follow the current accent color. Grouping is when you have this several of the same type of applications open. Instead of showing 4 Firefox icons, for example, it'll show you one with the little grouping indicator. I should note that there's an option for stacking. So if you really want to see all 4 of those Firefox icons in the taskbar, you can do that as well. But for those of us that group, they're just going to better color match with your color match with everything. So it keeps your feng shui happy. on the bug stomping
shui. Oh, sorry. Continue.
Yeah. Oh, on the bug stomping side, they fixed a way that misbehaving X Wayland apps could cause KWin to freeze, and one that caused notifications about modifier key changes to not actually appear. And they removed an issue where the task manager widget setting to reverse the direction that new tasks appear on your taskbar will actually work as originally intended. So that's always nice, having a feature that actually works. Solved a bug that caused the show logout screen item in the desktop context menu to not show enough items if you had customized the default logout option in the past when it was offered as an option. So some legacy options that could cause issues going forward if you actually had used them. When the global animations are set to instant, the window thumbnails in KWin's desktop grid effect are no longer too small. Excuse me. And there's a bunch more bugs which have been removed, but I'll let the curious follow the link in the show notes to Nate's blog for all the details and the links to see the code and to help with the project. Small ending note, if you look at the comments, there's already someone improving the blog as they put in a tag to link to an RSS feed for the blog. And next week, Nate will have the return of the dashboard where he reports the critical and 15-minute bug changes from the last week. So happy reading.
Yeah, fun stuff. It's always fun to go and see his stuff where they're doing crazy new things with KDE. I was humored by the feng shui. I was going to jump in and talk about that, but the moment is past. Yeah. The moment is past. Oh well.
Don't mess with the feng shui. That's just, bad karma.
Is that like messing with QEMU?
So something else that we passed over unintentionally was Rob.
Oh, now I was going to play it off as you did it on purpose because my story better match with yours, and then you were going to go back to Rob to merge it in, and then...
No, I jumped to you because yours made more sense, but I wasn't going to go back to Rob. But Rob convinced me in the back chat that I really better let him get his story in.
Yeah, he always whines.
Yeah, we're going to let Rob talk about Vulkan and QEMU.
This is a good one because virtualization is fun. So I'm going to talk about another cool improvement coming to my favorite hypervisor, KVM QEMU. Well, it's coming to QEMU. So for those familiar with KVM virtualization, or QEMU, I guess, really, you may be familiar with VirtIO drivers that I mentioned earlier. So these are drivers that can be ran on the client or guest OS for specific pieces of hardware. So they're hardware drivers that ran on the guest to provide better hardware support within QEMU. You don't have to use these if you don't want. You can use generic drivers, but when you do use these, it increases performance quite a bit. And, it's kind of like using the right driver for the right hardware. Use it for the right virtualized hardware. So the VirtIO GPU driver for Linux is getting a major improvement soon with Vulkan support. And this, along with the Mesa support that was added earlier this year, it may soon be much easier to run games in a virtual machine, at least run them well with good performance without fiddling with complex things like a GPU pass-through, because that's definitely not an easy task. Unless maybe if you got multiple GPUs, but
even then, that is challenging.
Yeah, you're right. It's challenging any way you look at it. So going through the Phoronix comments, there's a link to a video with someone testing it out. So they have, obviously, the host machine is a Linux. I can't remember what it was, but it was Linux. He showed the NeoVim or something. And then he went to his virtual machine, showed the NeoVim again. So the guest machine was also Linux. And then he played a Steam game on there, and the performance seemed pretty smooth, close enough to native that I didn't really notice the difference. And, although, the use case for running games on a Linux guest within a Linux virtual machine, it might be pretty small. I could see maybe doing it within my Proxmox, possibly, maybe some use cases there. But there's also a Windows guest driver that has similar aspirations coming. And I haven't found an article, but I found this also in the comments, dug through, took a look, and they also plan to add Vulkan and stuff like that. So at some point, this may be a decent alternative for a few games when they don't run well on Proton. You could maybe actually run them pretty well on a Windows virtual machine with this new VirtIO GPU drivers. So I think that could be pretty cool.
Hey, I tell you what else comes to mind. I remember when the Cosmic Alpha first came out, it was real unstable because it needed hardware acceleration.
Oh, yeah.
So, we're getting to the point to where you just about have to have some hardware acceleration to be able to do just normal running your desktop at all. So it's a good thing to finally have it working, and looking forward to that being more common.
Maybe that was the fix that System 76 was talking about. It'll Cosmic to run better in a VM.
I doubt it, but maybe could be.
We can hope.
Well.
All right. I think now we're ready for Ken talking about the supply chain focused startup StackLock. Who is StackLock? What is StackLock? Why is StackLock?
Well, let's hope I can answer some of those questions. But I want to thank Christine Hall, who wrote about a recent donation to the Open Source Software Foundation. The donation was StackLock's flagship platform, Minder. What is Minder? Minder is an open source platform that helps development teams and open source communities build more secure software and prove to others that what they've built is secure. Minder helps project owners proactively manage their security posture by providing a set of checks and policies to minimize risk along the software supply chain and attest their security practices to downstream consumers. Minder will begin as a sandbox project for a minimum of 3 months before it's elevated to be an incubating project, like any software project entering the Linux Foundation ecosystem. StackLock's co-founder and CTO, Luke Hines, pointed out that OpenSSF should be a good fit for Minder since the platform was created to make it possible to integrate supply chain tools, such as those that are already part of the OpenSSF ecosystem, so that they can be used in tandem. To quote him, Minder isn't just about being able to assert policies. In fact, he recently told Christine, it's about being able to tap into the full richness of the open source security ecosystem and set up policies using all these wonderful tools like Trivy, Bandit, and other open source tools. We want to make sure that we provide a framework that unlocks those tools for communities and then for enterprises at scale. According to Christine, in a nutshell, Minder is a way for developers and security teams to find and do away with security risks that might be hiding in open source code before it's merged into a project. It draws on OpenSSF scorecard, SigStore, and other best practices and integrates them into a single platform that can be a part of, say, a DevOps practice. Craig McLuckie, StackLock's co-founder and CEO, compares the platform to Kubernetes. He said, our ambition with this platform is to create something that has that kind of Kubernetes-like ethos, where it enables you to look across your organization and organize everything into resources and then map policies to resources by selectors and then run reconciliation. It's got a very strong kind of Kubernetes flavor to it. Now, I'm going to recommend reading Christine's article, and I do have it linked in the show notes, so you can get more details, including a link to Minder's GitHub page if you want to check it out.
Yeah, we interviewed Anchor, one of the guys from Anchor, just the other day on Floss Weekly, and it's a very similar thing that they're looking at, that they're working on, and it's intriguing how many companies and people and developers are trying more and more to take all of this seriously. Of let's make sure we have software bill of materials, SBOMs, that we're keeping up on top of all of that. You've got the guys at the kernel are pushing out untold numbers of CVEs for every release.
Let's not have any SBOMs on the show.
No, SBOMs are good. Software bill of materials. There are other kinds of bombs that we're not allowed to have on the show, but SBOMs are okay. But
some bombs we don't even want at home.
That's true.
Bath
yes.
bombs.
I've never done the bath bomb thing. I'm more of a shower guy. But anyway, Yeah,
not even going to touch that one.
Indeed. So let's talk about the Mesa fix. This one is really interesting. So this is something that it's very specific to AMD and the Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2, which for those that don't remember, that's the AMD solution for rendering your scenes at a lower resolution and then using some AI trickery to upscale them on the fly. And that gets used in things like the Steam Deck, basically to be able to push more pixels faster. Well, it turns out that there was a problem in Mesa with doing this. And one of the Valve Linux driver team, Samuel Pitoset, discovered the issue. And apparently this has been known for a couple of years now. There's about a 2-year-old bug report that the Mesa RADV driver performs significantly less. I'm basically reading from Phoronix there, significantly less than AMD GPU Pro, which this is always interesting. So like, okay, there are multiple drivers out there. Most of us know this, but I'll go over it real quickly. There are multiple drivers out there for AMD on Linux. Same thing for NVIDIA. But on AMD on Linux, there's like 3 different drivers that you can actually use. So you've got the old closed source legacy AMD driver. You've got the new closed source AMD driver. And then there's RADV, the open source AMD driver. And one of the things that developers will do, people will do, is they'll run the same application on the different drivers and compare how they act. And so when you have something like this, where one of them is significantly worse, it generally means that you've got a bug in in whichever one is performing worse. Or sometimes it means that you have something's not rendering correctly. But usually you can see that. So anyway, Samuel from Valve finally went in and he figured it out, and the fix is to cull all of the triangles and lines when W positions are 0, which I basically believe what that means is it's just not rendering the stuff that it's not supposed to render. Whereas before, there were things that were technically rendered but not actually visible, and so it's an optimization to be able to just ignore things that should be ignored. So yeah, he says the Pro driver was culling more than RADV because in FSR2 it was not specifying a cull mode, is what he says. And so yeah, like it was rendering things that weren't even on screen. So it's a 228% improvement. It's a 228% improvement. That is ridiculously huge. It is specific to the demo, the FSR2 demo. So not every game is going to see necessarily that sort of improvement, but I would imagine that some games are going to see a pretty big improvement. And so that is, again, that's with RDNA 2 with FSR2, and like I said, that's Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2. That's AMD's. Let's not actually render all the pixels. Let's just make up some of the pixels, and it looks basically as good. It's magic. GPU stuff these days are just magic. It really is.
It's AI.
Yeah.
Now it's interesting that this was Valve that brought this instead of AMD proper.
AMD is focusing right now on their compute stack. They're going after the AI and data market. They're carrying less right now for the gaming market, and Steam is, well, that's their whole bread and butter. Market.
This is also the RADV driver. The RADV driver it's for Radeon cards. It does Vulkan, but RADV is being developed entirely by the community. Mostly by the community. It is not an AMD product. So this is why it is not AMD engineers that are fixing things in it. Yeah. But it is Valve, because Valve has a bit of a vested interest, yes, in making AMD graphics work well.
That's what Valve does. Good things.
Valve generally does good things, yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. All right.
It pays off.
It pays off for all of us, yeah. Rob, for a second there, I thought you were talking about a certain social network.
Oh, I might be. I've been saying for a while. It's I'll keep saying it. It is time to get off of X. And as you indicated, although I think Mastodon is way better than Twitter, I'm talking about X.org or X11. So the bloated old code, it's seen series of CVE vulnerabilities in the past. Yeah, mostly nothing to really pull your hair out of, Jeff, but it has issues and major tech debt. Sometimes, when I talk about it in groups, it's time to move over to Wayland. The response I hear is like, yeah, the CVEs are fixed. They're all good now. I mean, generally, not necessarily in those words. But they weren't fixed. They were just weren't discovered or made public yet. So this week, CVE 2024-9632 was made public. And this is a security vulnerability that has been in X.org display server since 2006. That's 18 years ago. Back in, I think it was 1.1.1.1. So it's a local privilege escalation, makes it a little less severe than a remote code execution. But if the server is run as root, and it could become a remote code execution with X11 over SSH or something like that. And who else thinks it's time to move over to Wayland? The Raspberry Pi Foundation. They didn't exactly say that in those words, but their actions speak louder than their words, as Raspberry Pi OS now ships with Wayland being used by default. This week's Raspberry Pi OS update also brings better touchscreen support, better Raspberry Pi Connect integration, a new screen configuration tool called Raindrop, and other improvements. So if Raspberry Pi on this nice little system on its chip thinks, they can run Wayland, so can you.
Have we talked about the leak of the CM5 for the Pi? Have we talked about that on the show yet, guys?
We may have touched on it because it sounds familiar.
Yeah, so speaking of Raspberry Pi, this just comes to mind because you said Raspberry Pi, and I don't know that we've talked about it. So we've got the CM5, the Compute Module 5 is coming, and we know that it's coming because I think it was Mouser, one of the places that sell, one of the parts vendors. It may have been Mouser, it may have been somebody else. Leaked the coming of a whole bunch of add-ons for it, and had like a date. It's coming up very soon. Cool. It's super interesting that is coming, the CM5. So that is actually confirmed that CM5 is about to release.
I told my wife I was going to order a Raspberry Pi, and she got really excited until it came several weeks later and saw what the Raspberry Pi was, and that nobody could eat it.
Yeah, you really can't eat those. There's also a picture on the internet now of a CM5 engineering sample. So it's coming very soon. We also know that the Pi 500 is coming very soon, because there is, in the Raspberry Pi GitHub repository, there is now a DTS for Broadcom/BCM 2712-RPI-500. So those things are coming, and they are coming sooner rather than later. I'm personally super excited for the Pi 500. I just think it's cool. I'm looking forward to that a lot. It's going to be neat. I really hope that they put an NVMe slot in it. That's really going to make it a very nice, very usable computer.
We may have talked about the CM5 sometime toward the end of September, because I've got a bookmark for this, for a
first things to buy.
Well, actually, it's for our Onyx news article. about Ubuntu making preparations for the Raspberry Pi's Compute Module 5.
Yeah, there was that too. I'm trying to find the thing where I saw it. Here we go. Yeah, there's a new carrier board that got announced. Yeah, there's some cool stuff coming. So anyway, it's coming. They're both coming. We're looking forward to it, and you can run Wayland on it now. That's exciting.
As Kyra says, at least this Raspberry Pi never gets moldy.
I mean, unless you get it too wet, and then it might.
It could.
Yeah. I wonder if you'll see on the precise hardware that is a Raspberry Pi, I wonder if we'll see like a performance improvement from Wayland as opposed to X. You might.
Probably will with their new compositor.
Yeah, I think we might. All right, Jeff, you've got some Linux bites, some little stories that you want to run through.
Yeah, so this next segment is what I'm going to call Linux Bites. These are a few stories which are too short for a single segment, but I found them interesting. And this is like when I have the hardware corner, but these are software, so bites. So first up is Ubuntu 25.04, which is named Plucky Puffin. It's going to be defaulting to the 03 optimizations. Now, we've talked about this in the past, how Ubuntu was, they had some releases that they weren't main releases, but they were ones that you could try, and they were compiled with the 03 optimizations because they were just trying it out to see kind of how it shook out. And, we talked about it, and while overall it doesn't have much of an increase in speed, for most things, there are some applications which see a huge improvement. Now, some of those are compute and things where you can get the AVX 512 instructions. Certain things like that really see a huge improvement. But, overall, like when you look at the benchmarking, at worst case, they were the same as the 02 optimizations, and at best, they had a significant speed increase. So there wasn't really a downside for almost most everything. Now, on a side note, too, that 2504 is now open for development for those that want to get a peek under the hood. So there's opportunity there if you really want to play around really early, but it's pre-alpha at this stage, so you're tread with care. The second story deals with Fedora looking at going to the 03 optimizations. Now they're simply going where Canonical's saying they're going to do it as a default. Fedora saying we want comments. We're open for comments. See what everyone thinks about the pros and cons, and a lot of it comes down as people are concerned about code size, and call out not a lot of performance increase outside of some special applications. Others want to see the code move forward with optimizations and, fully take advantage of the latest, greatest hardware. Right now, they're still getting the comments, so nothing's decided. But with Canonical moving that way, there is some pressure on Red Hat to follow suit with their Fedora spin. Now, I should mention that this will be like Canonical, and while it could go to default, doesn't mean that you won't be able to get the less optimized versions as well. So there will probably be a couple different versions. And if you look at the article in the show notes, they even talk about different ways they could optimize and stuff, but it something more like what SUSE does, but how they handle things is a little different. So if you're really curious, you can take a look. But right now, there's no decision. Red Hat's just looking at it with Fedora. The next story is Linus Torvalds, and he's proving he can still write code and not just flame others for their code. So Linus contributed a patch which gave a 2.6% speed up increase in 21 lines. The intent of the patch is avoiding the use of barrier underscore no spec within the 64-bit function copy from user function. So Linus explains that in the 21-line kernel patch, and this is a quote, the barrier underscore no spec in 64-bit copy from user is slow. Instead, use pointer mask to force the user pointer to all ones for invalid addresses. The kernel test robot reports a 2.6% improvement in the per thread operations benchmark. And we'll have to wait and see how it shakes out in the real world, but the benchmark looks like there was some real improvement. Now, while this might seem small, you got to keep in mind each small improvement stacks up, and that's how we get the very most out of our OS. So a % here and a % there after a while really start to add up. Now, our final story is about Bcache FS and how they're squashing bugs. Lead developer Kent Overstreet said test dashboard failures are down 40% from a month ago, and critical bug reports have dropped off dramatically, and we're starting to crank through the SYZBOT stuff, SYZBOT. So I pronounce that how you will. So this is what he said. Been hitting some bugs in compaction, and lately I've been seeing some sporadic tests hang due to what looks like a block layer write back throttling. So there's still some problems. It's not perfect yet. But for those wanting to test the latest Bcache FS, it will be coming out in 6.12 RC6, which might be out tomorrow or already is by the time you hear this podcast. Just a little note, Bcache FS is considered by some as a possible replacement for ZFS, but at this point it's still really young, so time will tell if it makes it. But it's supposed to be that level of performance and security and safety for a file system, kind of like ZFS, but we'll see where that goes. So take a look at the show notes for the links and all the articles I've mentioned to get the details of what I have left out for brevity. But, like I said, short stories, but I thought they were kind of interesting. So,
yeah, all very interesting stories.
Yeah, especially that improvement by Linux.
Yeah, 2.6% or whatever, that's not anything on its own that you're going to really feel. But in the long run, that makes a difference. Every little bit counts.
Yeah, and every once in a while we talk about, well, we had a % here and 2% there. And, they usually say about 10% is where you can kind of feel it when you're just working on a machine. But, you stack them up and they build up over time.
Yep, makes sense.
So,
go drive.
I was just going to say, what's on your screen behind you?
That is the Fedora 41 login page for KDE. It finished the update in the background and it's up. Now I've got it. Yeah, it's successful. I got to reboot it again to grab the right kernel because for whatever reason, it's still running like 6.9.5 and it should be running 6.11.5. So while Ken talks about his story, I'm going to do a reboot and we're going to see if the right kernel is listed in Grub. And if it's not, I'm going to... What's that?
Go ahead. I was just going to say, we already said the install went sideways, so...
Yeah, it worked. Everything's there. It's just not doing the right kernel for whatever reason. So I'm going to figure that out.
Are you sure the rest of it's there?
When I tried to do updates, it used DNF5. So yes. All right, Ken, why don't you tell us quickly about, well, not too quickly, tell us about GStreamer. And I'm going to turn around and reboot
quick about it.
Don't be too quick about it. I'm going to turn around and reboot a computer.
1 minute.
Well, first off, I want to go ahead and say, Bobby Borisoff, thank you for writing about the release of GStreamer 1.24.9. He basically starts off by saying it is a new bug fix update in the stable 1.24 series of the popular cross-platform multimedia framework. Yes, we're talking about GStreamer. Now, GStreamer 1.24.9 addresses several key issues, including a crucial security fix for the GST-RTSP-server and improvements to handling latency and start times in GST aggregator for forced live mode. This release also enhances the handling of dynamic mix matrices in audio convert and improves parser selection for encoders in encode bin. Now, for those of y'all that don't do much with audio or video on your computers, one of the components that Linux uses is the VL42 component. Some of y'all may also be familiar with the web RTC tools, which, like web RTC Sync and WebRTC bin. Well, along with QML6 GLSRC, they all have received performance updates aiming to smooth your experience with video and real-time streaming. Now, GStreamer 1.24.9 includes various bug fixes for stability and reliability, ensuring a more seamless experience across all platforms, not just Linux. Mac OS. What's that other one, Rob?
Windows.
BSD, I think.
Yeah, BSD. There you go. Now, GStreamer's next major feature release will be 1.26. And of course, you're going to have version 1.25 is going to be the unstable development version. If you are curious about the final details of this release, I do recommend checking out Bobby's article or the GStreamer 1.24.9 release notes for a more in-depth overview. I also have included a link to the recent GStreamer conference where there's about 2 days worth of video that you could spend watching. I haven't finished watching it all yet.
I'm sure there is some super interesting stuff there because
Did I stretch that out enough?
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So no, it was not too long. It was about right.
See, I was waiting right in the middle to go, and back to you, Jonathan, so we can...
I was ready for it. As you can see, the machine is still booting up behind me. There's so much interesting stuff going on with things like GStreamer and that's tied up with Pipewire and things even that Firefox and Chrome are doing. It's cool. It's neat to see. I like it. All right, so we've got, I think, one more story, and this is something I'm real surprised that Jeff didn't grab, and that is that AMD has finally announced the Ryzen 7 9800, the 9800 X3D gaming processor, and apparently it's launching November 7th, so in about a week, not even a week from now. Now, how much of those are actually going to be available, I'm not sure, but that is the launch date. And
I was going to talk about it when the embargo was up.
Yeah, so I guess that's the important thing to say here. We only have the announce. We don't have any benchmarks, so we don't know for sure how well it's going to perform, what it's going to, how it's going to work, whether it's going to be. Jeff may have some ideas.
Well, this is non-insider information. It is, but it comes from places like
somebody else linked it first.
Jay's 2 cents, places like that, and they kind of hint. Oh yeah, a lot of your gaming charts, the bars are going to look real small compared to what's coming. There's a lot of them going, don't buy anything if you're gaming. Wait until this thing comes out.
I thought you said AMD wasn't focused on gaming right now.
No, for their GPU driver. On the chip side, the 9800 X3D is supposed to be about 25% faster overall. If you can believe the rumors. The embargo is still on, so we will see on the 7th when they all come out. But this is kind of Gen 2 of the X3D. Now people are going to say, wait, this is the third chip. Well, true, but both the 5800 and the 7800 had the cache above the cores. Now they're doing underneath, and they're not getting the heating, and they can have better cooling because the memory's in a different location through via connections, and it's going to allow them to clock higher and push things a lot harder, and it's supposed to be a really good design. So this is from if the internet, not insider information, nothing insider, is to be believed, then don't buy any chips until if your main thing is gaming. If your production, get the 90, get one of the 16 cores, or you can Intel. But
the X3D have done well on compiling too in the past, right? Like it's not like it's not like they're bad chips for production. It's just there's a few niche things, gaming being one of the big ones, where they just scream.
Oh yeah, and it just doesn't have the core. So like if you're hammering,
right,
you know, some modeling stuff, you know, get the 9950X and just be happy. And I mean, and not like the other chips won't play games. It's just if you have a 7000 series, for example, then you're going to get, I think it's like a 5% uplift or 3% in gaming. It's not really anything better. If you're doing production, it is better, and it does pretty good. The Intel chips, same thing. If you're doing production, yeah, the 285 does really well. It's less power, less heat, and crunches numbers just fine. If you're gaming, wait or stick to the 14900K because it's better for gaming than the new chip is. But this new 9800X3D is, if the rumors are to be believed, it's going to be the king of the heap by a long way.
Yeah.
And whatever number they've got on launch, it's not going to be enough. They're going to sell out.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it's not going to be really expensive?
It went up a little bit.
The MSRP is $479, which, particularly if you can just do a drop-in replacement on your existing rig, that's not bad at all.
I mean, that's cheaper than I paid a few years ago when prices were just coming down.
Yeah.
Or whatever it was at that time.
The thing with this one, though, I'm sure, is it's going to get scalped for a while.
Oh yeah.
And so, you know, you won't be able to buy one for $479 for several months, I'm sure.
Yeah, they're going to sell out of everything. And there's a reason. If you look right now, if you're in the mood for like a 9950X or any of the regular 9000 non-X3D chips, they're all down about $50 plus right now. There's some screaming deals because they're trying to move some chips because when they know when that thing releases, the average public is not going to look at those chips again.
Yeah. Yep.
Unless you're doing compute or something like that,
where you need a bunch of cores,
or you're building a budget system,
or your real budget. Yeah, those are the two places where the rest of them make sense.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move.
But even then, you might go to the 7000 series if you.
Yeah. True.
If your budget.
All right. Let's move to some command line tips. Rob's got it up first, and he's talking about BC.
Because.
Is that the era?
No, Ken, this is not
the old days.
Not the good old days, Ken.
Basic Campbell.
Bob Campbell, that's what it stands for. Stands for Basic Calculator, BC. So BC is a real simple command, but if you need a calculator and you're on the command line, if you type BC, it'll be interactive mode. So those who could see, I type BC, now I'm interactive. If I type 2 plus 3, tells me 5. If I type 10 times 2, I get 20. If I try to quit, if I try to do Control C, it doesn't let me out. Oh, I have to use quit. Okay, so I have to type quit. So I type quit. So other things, obviously, it's not always interactive. You can use this with, if you want to build a script or something and have it calculate. You could do like echo 5 plus 2 and then pipe that to BC and it's going to output your number. And as always, if you want to see all the features, do BC -- help. And, it'll say that, -I is going to force interactive, but it's already interactive anyway. You can use different math libraries. You can do quiet so it doesn't print that banner that you guys watching saw at the beginning. And that's about it. You can -W warn about non-standard BC constructs. You can see the version too if you're looking for an exciting BC update to come and know if you have that version of BC. But real simple command built right in. I don't know if I didn't check if that's core utils, but it's been right there on every system I ever checked. I didn't have to install anything.
So there is something that BC is notably missing, and I'm sure Jeff is very sad. No reverse Polish notation.
Oh.
Yeah, it's basic calculator, not that.
Well, can it do like power and square root and things like that?
Yes.
Okay.
With like the caret, and you could do, if I go back into BC here, you could do like, is 1 greater than 5? And it says 0 because it's not. How about 5 greater than 1? Hey, 1. So it's got a Boolean there, 0 for false, 1 for true. So you could do things like that too. And yeah, you can do carets and percents and stuff like that too. Cool. If you check the show notes, it'll show a document with like the operators and stuff that you can use.
All right, Jeff, you've got a tip here. Baobab.
Sure, we'll go with that. Baobab, Baobab, something like that. So it's sort of a command line tip. It's a graphical disk usage analyzer, but you can start it from the command line. So we'll call it. Baobab is it can either scan specific folders, local and remote, or devices in order to give a tree representation, including each directory, the size or percentage of the branch. It can also auto detect any mounted, unmounted device, and a graphical representation is also provided for any selected folder, so you can just get specific. There's not a lot of options. It's just the normal help and version information. And the third option is the --all--file--systems, which tells the program not to skip directories on different file systems. So by default, it does that, but you can say, no, I want everything. The main use of the program is just kind of find out where your storage is going, so you can decide if you're in good shape or not and what's taking all your storage. You can traverse up and down in the tree, and it'll keep drawing new graphs, and it gives you kind of a rotary pie graph that's stacked, or there's a tree option as well that you can look at to try to decide what parse the data how you see fit. But pretty simple and basic, but give it a try and see if it's helpful when trying to sort out where all your drive space went.
Now, the question that I have is, did GNOME rip off KDE's FileLite, or did KDE rip off GNOME's Baobab?
I don't know. I guess I'm not familiar with the KDE version.
It's the exact same thing, but made by KDE.
I thought you were a KDE guy. What are you doing using the GNOME software?
Hey, we have love for everybody here.
No, you don't.
We don't have time for your hatred, Rob.
Don't lie.
The cool thing about Linux is that you can do that. You can run GNOME software on KDE and KDE on software on GNOME, and it just works. So
yeah, I don't them both with XFCW.
You can,
or XFCE.
I was like, what is XFCW?
It's the Wayland port, obviously.
Oh.
So all right. We established early in the show, I do things very dangerously. I'm just, I'm all over the map.
Don't pull your hair out over it.
All right, Ken, let's talk about Pipewire again.
Yes, this week I am introducing another Pipewire command line tool. This time it's pw-top. Similar to the top command, it is a dynamic real-time view of the Pipewire node and device statistics. And I'm going to expand that so y'all can see it a little better. How's that? For those of y'all listening, I've brought up my command line, and I've got the first option that I'm going to use with pw-top. Just like with Rob's, it's --help. Now, when I hit the enter button, it displays how you can use pw-top and some of the options that you can use with it. You have, for example, /V or --version to find out what version of libware you have. So we're going to go with the version. And in my case, on Ubuntu Studio 24.04, it's only compiled with libpipewire 1.0.5. You also have where you can run it in batch mode with a -B or --batch. And with that, when you run it in batch mode, it comes up with continuously just running back. And if you look on the, for those of you all listening, there's also a -N or -- iterations where you can put the number of times you want it to run when it's in bash mode. Here, I'm just going to run it twice. And because of the size I've expanded the screen to, for those of y'all listening, some of the stuff's wrapping. But as I go back here, you'll see that it's put out the information about the different audio and video devices or nodes that I have twice. And it breaks it by showing the column headers at each input. Now, since we want to talk about it, I'm going to go ahead and just run it without any of those options. And that's where it's really handy. And I'm going to size that down a bit so we can get it all completely on the screen for the most part. When you're in the dynamic real-time display, it has it has several columns. The first, starting on the left, is the node status column. Then you have the ID column. This gives you the ID of the Pipewire node or device. You've got a QUANT, a header for the current quantum column. That's for drivers, and the suggested quantum for follower nodes. Then you have that followed by the rate column. This can be either the actual or current rate for drivers or the suggested rate for follower nodes. Then you've got some other columns that give you some information like waiting time of the node and busy time for some of the nodes. And then you have two columns, W/Q and B-Q, that give you the rate of wait to quant or rate of busy to quant. And one that I'm sure Jonathan probably used when he was trying to troubleshoot stuff is a column headed with error, ERR. It gives you the total of X runs and errors that you may be seeing. Mm-hmm. And in my case, for those of y'all listening, I've got one object that's got some error, two objects that have errors. They're both for my OBS setup. Probably frame rates being dropped, right, Jonathan?
Probably, since that's looking at streaming around an actual video signal.
Yep. And then, of course, you have the format that's used. And for the two that are dropping frame rates, it has, for the first part, BGRA, which is probably, guessing here, since I'm still learning how to read all this, the format, the type of format being used, but it's showing that it's got the sample rate for 19 by 1080 or 1080p screen. But it gives you some very useful information. And as I said, it is a real-time update. I'm going to quickly add another device here. Living dangerously here.
You go, Ken.
Now you'll see that it added another device at the bottom of the screen. It's a Yamaha keyboard that I had hooked up but turned off. All I did was just turn it on. So it's a way to check to see if devices are actually being registered by your system and by Pipewire. Great little tool that I'm going to have fun playing with. Now, to get out of it, you can do a Control-C, but I found it's probably safer in trying different keys to see if there was anything else you could do with it by just hitting Q. And Jonathan, have you got any stories about using this one?
It has been a bit since I used it last. I know when I was trying to troubleshoot things in Pipewire having more latency than they should have, I used that. That's one of the things that's pretty useful about it, is you can take a look at the kind of latency that something should have. comparing that with doing the actual latency test through, I forget the name of the binary, but there's a program where you can run it, and it'll give you an output signal, and then you can pipe the input signal back into it, and then you can hold your earbuds up next to a microphone, and it'll do the feedback loop and then check and see what the actual latency is. And I don't remember what that's called. I think we've covered it as a command line tip before, but using the feedback? No, there's an actual binary name. It's like Jack. It's Jack something, like Jack measure or Jack delay, maybe Jack delay, something like that. And you can use those together and kind of compare the two and see if it's where it should be. So I've used it for stuff like that. All right, I've got a command line tip for you, and this one is actually pretty fun. I've been messing around with it on the command line myself here, and it's sort of a twofer. It's two tips. It is colorize, which is the old way to do it, and then CCZE, which stands for C colorize. CCZE is a little bit easier to use, and it is also going to be much faster because it's written in C. And it's pretty simple. It takes a regular log and it adds color to it. So, if you have normally you look at your logs, they're black and white and they're kind of boring to look at. You run them through CCZE and it's going to do stuff for you like make the errors and the warnings stand out with different colors. So it's going to make it just easier to scan through a log and see what's going on with it. So real simple little command, but man, it's actually pretty useful. And so like I said, I've been having fun fiddling around with that. And something to add to your toolbox. Like I said, very, very simple.
Is that something you would pipe to it?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. I've been piping into it. It'll show you. Now, I'm having trouble right now with trying to actually use journalctl to pipe into it because it flashes and then goes away. But I think that has to do more with journalctl than it does CCZE. Let's see. And of course, Verilog messages doesn't exist anymore. What's up with that? Here, we'll just go with use sudo. There we go. And then if I pipe it through, I must be missing something with CCZE, or there must be a problem with it on this machine, because every time it flicks to what I want it to show me and then it goes away. So there's either some command line switch that I'm missing, or there's something like that. I will see if I can real quick go to where the guy was using it and telling me about it, because he was not having this trouble.
Could you pipe that output from after piping to color CCZE into less?
I tried that. Oh, okay. Apparently -A. I'm not sure why. What does it say that does?
Always keep it on.
Raw ANSI instead of using curses. Huh.
Oh.
I guess you need -A. That because that works. And so with that, you can do you can get the journalctl. So I'm using a command line, something like journalctl-b for I only want from the last boot. And then you can give it a -u for a unit. So that's like I only want to see logs from this particular service. Then you give it, say, Bluetooth.service. And then you just use the pipe symbol, pipe it into CCZE and then -A. And yeah, there you go. It goes through, it colorizes it, and if there's an error or something, it'll really stand out and you can see it. So, very cool. I like it. All right. I want to get the guys to let them get in the last word if they want to plug anything. We're going to let Rob go first. I have a guess as to what he's going to plug.
Well, I am going to plug my usual stuff, which is... first, my website. And to get there, it's robertpcampbell.com. And there is a link there, a button there to go to my LinkedIn, another one to go to my Twitter, another one to go to my Mastodon, and another one to go to donate me a coffee. Can't get that to go right there. Donate me a coffee. And you can use the BC command I taught you to calculate how many coffees you need to get me to get a new car. Also, I'm not going to be here next week. I'm going to be at a thing for one of my kids' birthdays.
Oh,
so
cool.
If you want me to come back after that, just donate me some coffees and I will return.
How much to not come back?
You beat me to it, Jeff. That's what I was going to ask.
Sorry, I stole your thunder.
Earmark your coffees one way or the other. When I'll buy me a coffee, you can specify. You can put a note in there. So it'd be like voting. You buy a coffee to vote for or against. All right, Ken.
Well, I'm going to take this opportunity to wish my son a happy birthday. He just had his birthday today. And since he's out of state, I'm taking this opportunity to say it to him, even though I did text it when I got up today.
Cool. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Curtis.
Happy birthday, Curtis. All right, Jeff.
I actually have an article in the show notes. Something interesting, but I don't know how serious this really is. It's an article to the feds say that critical software must drop C and C++ by 2026 or face risk. Basically, they're pushing for memory-safe software, but reading the article, it was a little wishy-washy on whether it's we strongly suggest versus there's going to be actual consequences. And then there's some stuff for open source. Take a look at it. I didn't feel like I was qualified to fully speak on it, so it's in there for something to read. And based on a couple weeks ago, the Floss Weekly I did, I am now on Mastodon. So you can find me at Jeff_Massie. I'm on the TWiT.social network or hub or whatever you call it. So
server?
You can find server. I don't know. I'm new at this. You can follow me. I can tell you right now it's going to be boring because I don't do a lot on social media. All the excitement is here on the show. So, but if you want to, at least you're not going to get spammed to death if you follow me.
Yep.
And have a great week, everybody.
Spam.
Love seeing everybody listening live, and thank you.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I am looking for Jeff Massie. You said it was at Jeff_Massie?
Yeah.
Am I misspelling your name? I don't see it here yet.
Massie.
I'm not misspelling your name. I will keep looking for that because I'm sure he's on there. Just, yeah. Let's see here. Cue the Jeopardy music. Oh, there he is. Followed. Haha. You have a follower now, Jeff. Actually, you have like two of us, or maybe just me. Anyway, welcome to Jeff. He's on Mastodon. I'll shoot some links out. So I want to go ahead and plug. Normally I would point at my monitor over here, but right now I guess I'm plugging Fedora instead. Which that's okay. I'm a fan of Fedora as well. But you can find my other work at Hackaday. We've got the security column goes live every Friday, and then Floss Weekly is on Tuesdays. We record on Tuesdays. It goes live on Wednesdays. We've actually got a really neat one coming up this week. I reached out to Daniel Sternberg. That's the curl guy. And he is coming back. And then just because that was the guest from episode 51 of Floss Weekly. And so because it is such an old guest, I reached out, and we've got Randall coming back as a co-host again. So that's going to be fun as well. So that's this Tuesday. If there's, something going on this upcoming Tuesday that you really want to distract yourself from, that you don't want to have to worry about, that you just want to turn the news off for some reason, you can come hang out with us on Floss Weekly, and you know what you're going to get there. It's going to be great. We appreciate everybody being here, both live and then on the download, and we will see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show.